They built it to welcome the world. They said it was the city's proudest landmark. Millions passed through its arches. Soldiers, immigrants, families returning home. But then something changed. In secret rooms, behind City Hall doors, a decision was made. One that would wipe this icon off the map forever. Why did the city turn against its own heart? Why was the Ferry Building marked for destruction? And what stopped the wrecking ball just seconds before impact? Welcome to another hidden chapter of history. I'm John, your storyteller, and the voiceover artist for this channel, Historia Unseen. Let's uncover the truth they almost buried forever. They wanted to erase it, but it stood in their way. A building that had once been the heart of a city, now treated like a problem that needed to disappear. But why? Why would San Francisco's own leaders want to destroy the Ferry Building? What secrets were buried inside its bricks? And what did one forgotten man do to stop it all? This is not just a story about a building. It's about a city's soul, almost ripped apart. Let's go back to where it all began. The year was 1898. San Francisco was growing fast. Ships filled the harbor. Goods poured in from the Pacific. And people came by the thousands, chasing dreams, chasing freedom. The city needed something big, something bold, a gateway to the new world. So they built it, right at the edge of the water. A masterpiece of stone and steel, with a proud clock tower that rose like a flag. They called it the Ferry Building. It wasn't just a station. It was the first thing millions saw when they arrived. Sailors coming home from war, immigrants hoping for a new life, farmers bringing crops, children with wide eyes looking at the tall tower for the first time. The building stood like a guardian, welcoming everyone who came from the sea. Inside, the halls echoed with footsteps and voices. Luggage rolled across tile floors. Whistles blew, conductors shouted, and the clock never stopped ticking. For years, it was the busiest terminal in the country. More people passed through this building than any other in the West. It became a symbol of freedom, of growth, of America. But no one knew what was coming. Then in 1906, the earth shook. The Great San Francisco earthquake struck with fury. Buildings crumbled. Fire spread like a monster across the city. Thousands lost everything, but not the Ferry Building. Its walls shook, glass shattered, but the tower stood firm, unbroken, unmoved. And while much of the city burned, people ran to the Ferry Building, not away from it. It became a shelter, a station of hope, a place where mothers held their children close, where soldiers passed out blankets, where food and water were handed to the weak. It survived when so much else didn't, and that made it something more than stone. It became sacred. Through the decades, it remained strong. World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, the Ferry Building stood through it all. But then something began to change. After the war, America looked toward the future. Skyscrapers, highways, cars and concrete. Old buildings, they were called outdated, ugly, in the way. San Francisco city planners wanted a new look, a cleaner skyline, and the Ferry Building, it didn't fit. Some called it a relic. Others said it blocks traffic. Behind closed doors, plans were drawn. Whispers turned into meetings. Sketches were made without the tower. And one bold idea rose to the top: tear it down. But the people didn't know. Not yet. As they boarded ferries, as they watched the clock strike noon, they had no idea the wrecking ball was being prepared. Inside City Hall, one line was added to a budget sheet. Hidden, quiet, deadly. The building's fate was almost sealed. And then something strange happened. A letter was found. Old, yellowed, written by one of the original builders. It read, "Let this place always remind them that the city belongs to the people, and no hand should ever silence the clock." That letter reached someone, a man who once played under that tower as a boy, now working deep inside the planning office. He read the words again and again, and he made a choice, one that would change everything. The letter had been read, folded, and read again. The man holding it was no hero, just a city planner named Walter Day. Quiet, careful, always on time. But that letter, the one from 1898, It reached something inside him. He remembered walking with his father, hand in hand, ice cream melting down his fingers, as they stood beneath the tower and watched the big clock tick above the bay. That was 40 years ago. Now, Walter sat in a cold office, surrounded by blueprints, numbers, and silent orders. On his desk, a thick folder labeled Ferry Project Phase 2. He opened it, and there it was, a map of the waterfront, modern buildings, wide roads, and no ferry building. In its place, a glass office tower. He stared at the sketch. The artist had drawn a thin gray box where the clock tower once stood, and just above it, 2 words were stamped. Area cleared. The plan was simple, quiet but deadly. The city wouldn't announce anything. No press releases, no signs. They would just renovate, then close the ferry operations, and finally declare the building unsafe, unfit for modern use. After that, demolition would begin. The contract was already being written. Big money was involved. A private company was ready to step in and modernize the waterfront. They called it the Bayline Dream. Smooth, shiny, profitable, and no more clock tower to get in the way. Walter knew what it meant. He knew what would be lost, and he also knew what would happen if he said anything. In his office, the phone rang once. He let it go. Then again. This time he picked it up. A voice said, "Phase 2 starts Monday. Keep it quiet." Click. But Walter didn't go home that night. He stayed late. He looked through drawers, old maps, building notes, historical markers. He found one from 1934, a protest sign that read, "The tower stood when the city fell. Protected." He took it with him. Across the city, no one knew what was coming. The ferry lights still blinked. The tower still rang at every hour. People rushed for boats, drank coffee inside, read newspapers near the windows. But deep below, at the city's underground archive center, a blueprint had already been signed, one that showed exactly where the bulldozers would strike first. Meanwhile, something strange happened. A janitor named Eddie was sweeping the city hall basement when he found a large cardboard tube near the trash. It had no label, just a red stamp that said, "Final revision." Curious, Eddie opened it. What he saw made him stop breathing. It was the ferry building, but not like anyone knew it. The roof was gone, the front hall erased, the tower completely vanished. In its place, the parking garage. At the bottom, he saw a signature, and next to it a date. Demolition begins August 18th. That was only 12 days away. Eddie didn't know what to do. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't rich. He just cleaned floors. But he knew the tower. He had proposed to his wife under that clock. He took his son to watch ships come in every Sunday. He folded the paper, put it in his jacket, and walked out into the night. The next morning, Walter's desk was empty. He didn't show up. No one said why. In his place, a younger man arrived. Slick hair, loud shoes. He carried a laptop and smiled at everyone. When asked about the ferry project, he said, "It's not a demolition. It's a transformation." But by then, the city had started to whisper. Someone leaked a copy of the sketch to a small newspaper. The headline read, "Icon or obstacle? Is the ferry building next to go?" People began to notice. Tourists asked questions. Old workers made phone calls. Something was waking up, but the city was still moving forward. Papers were being signed. Machines were being ordered, and the clock tower kept ticking, completely unaware that its time was running out. The newspapers said it was just a rumor, that the ferry building was safe, that nothing had been officially planned. But a few people didn't believe that, and one of them was a schoolteacher. Her name was Clara Holt. She taught local history at a small school near Market Street. Every year, she brought her students to the ferry building, told them stories about ships, gold rush, and the earthquake of 1906. But this year, something felt different. She noticed scaffolding on the east side, a door that was always open now locked. And when she asked one of the guards what was happening, he just said, "Routine maintenance, nothing to worry about." But Clara was worried. That night, she stayed up late in the school library. digging through old records, books, newspapers, files, and deep in one dusty folder, she found something odd. A black and white photo dated 1907. It showed the Ferry Building after the earthquake. Smoke in the background, broken windows, but still standing tall. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "She didn't fall when the city did. Protect her always." Clara felt a chill. The handwriting looked familiar. She turned the photo over again. There was a small mark in the corner, the initials WD. Walter Day. Clara remembered the name. She'd read about him once, an old city planner who vanished from public records in the late 1950s. Some said he was fired. Others said he disappeared after leaking building plans to the press. Now his initials were showing up again. Clara started asking around. She visited the local archive, talked to dock workers, spoke with an old ferry operator named Gus, who had worked there since 1946. Gus leaned close and whispered, "They've wanted to kill that tower for years. They just needed the right excuse." He pulled out a wrinkled envelope from his coat. Inside it was a copy of a demolition form, unsigned, dated 1959. It had never been used, but it showed one thing clearly. Plan B, remove clock tower, phase 3. Clara couldn't believe it. They had been trying to do this for decades, and now they were trying again, silently. She decided to act. Clara called her students. Not all of them, just the ones who cared about history. She showed them the documents, the photos. The blueprint sketch leaked to the newspaper. One student, Max, said, "This is crazy. Are they really going to destroy it?" Clara nodded. "Unless we stop them." They printed flyers, made signs, created a petition. They planned a peaceful protest right in front of the Ferry Building. Clara called City Hall to file a permit. The woman on the phone paused, then said, "We're sorry. That location is under restricted use. No gatherings allowed." Clara asked why. The woman hung up. That same night, Clara returned to her classroom to pick up the posters. But something was wrong. The door was open. Lights off. Silence. Inside, the posters were gone. The photos vanished. Only one thing was left on the blackboard, written in chalk. "You're wasting your time." Clara stood frozen. Her heart raced. Someone knew what she was planning, and they wanted her to stop. But she didn't stop. The next day, she stood outside the Ferry Building alone, holding one last photo, the one from 1907, the one with Walter's initials. A few students joined her, then a few more. Then a man in a janitor's uniform walked up and said, "You're Clara." "Yes, someone wanted you to have this." He handed her a folded envelope. Inside was a page torn from Walter Day's journal. It read, "If the city turns its back on history, then the people must turn and face it." She looked up at the tower, and something clicked. This wasn't just about saving a building. It was about saving memory. But she had no idea that someone inside City Hall was already working to silence her completely. Someone with the power to erase names, cancel permits, and make people disappear. The Ferry Building stood quiet, but something felt wrong. The seagulls still flew above. The clock still ticked every hour, and boats still came and went on the bay. But behind the tall tower, something had begun. It started with a curtain. A tall black tarp was hung on the east side of the building. The city called it protective scaffolding. But no one could see what was happening behind it. No workers came in through the front. No signs explained the project. It was all quiet, too quiet, until one morning, the clock stopped. It froze at 6:43 a.m. No chimes, no movement, just silence. At first, people thought it was just broken. Maintenance, wiring issues, maybe something small. But to those who paid attention, it felt like a warning. Clara stood across the street and stared at it. The tower looked tired, like it was being erased slowly, piece by piece. And then she saw it. Two men in suits, not workers, came out of the black curtain. They weren't wearing construction helmets. They carried tablets. They took photos, and then disappeared into a black van with no plates. Clara snapped a photo, zoomed in. There was a logo on one of the tablets. Apex Infrastructure Group. She searched it online. No website, No contact. Just one old article from a business magazine about a company that specializes in quiet demolition projects for urban redevelopment. She felt her stomach drop. Meanwhile, across the city, a young engineer named Luis Bennett was reviewing a job file at his firm. It was labeled Waterfront Systems, Revised. Inside, he found a set of diagrams. They weren't supposed to be there. One showed the Ferry Building's foundation, marked with red X symbols under the main walls. Another diagram showed tunnel routes, leading away from the building. It didn't make sense, unless someone was preparing it to be moved, or worse, weakened. Luis knew the risks. He had seen what happened to whistleblowers, but something told him to act. He printed the diagrams, slipped them into a folder, and left a message for Clara, using a code word they had agreed on. The clock didn't stop on its own. That night, Clara met Luis at a coffee shop. They sat by the window, speaking quietly. He showed her the pages. She stared at the red excess, the tunnel marks. "They're not fixing it," she whispered. "They're killing it from underneath." Luis nodded. "And if they finish, it will fall by itself." No news, no cameras, just a quiet collapse. Clara looked out at the dark tower across the bay. It was like watching a friend slowly being poisoned. They decided to act. The next morning, Clara made copies of everything. She handed them to reporters, neighbors, students. She sent anonymous emails to preservation groups. She even tried to speak at a public meeting, but her name was not on the list. Her request had been denied due to timing. No one let her speak. That same week, something happened that shook the city. A deep crack appeared on the north wall of the Ferry Building. It ran from the base to just under the second-floor window. People noticed. Photos spread online. Tourists started asking questions. The city responded fast. A spokesman stood in front of the cameras and said, "The building is safe. We are performing structural reinforcements. There's no cause for alarm." But the cameras didn't see the workers being told to stay away from the east wall. They didn't see the engineers being told to ignore certain blueprints. And they didn't know that one company had full control behind the curtain. Then came the sirens. One night, just after midnight, an alarm went off inside the Ferry Building. Security arrived. Police came. But there was no break-in. Nothing was stolen. No doors were opened. Only one thing had changed. The crack on the wall was bigger, and the clock still frozen. Luis tried to get the city's attention. He emailed 5 different departments. No one replied. Then one of his co-workers told him, "Management says you're off the ferry project, effective immediately." The silence was getting louder. People stopped asking questions. Some were afraid. Some didn't care. But Clara refused to stay quiet. She stood again at the foot of the tower, this time with a speaker and a single sign that read, "Let the city hear her ring again." But she didn't know. That city hall had made its final move. The clock tower stood, but it felt like a ghost. No chimes, no ticking hands, just silence above the bay. But below, people were starting to whisper. Dock workers, fishermen, old ferry captains. They remembered what the tower meant, and they weren't ready to forget. One of them was Frank Marlowe, a 91-year-old Navy veteran. He had served in World War II, came home in 1946, and the first thing he saw was the Ferry Building's clock shining through the fog. He never forgot it. To him, that tower meant survival. It meant coming home. Frank had stayed in San Francisco ever since. He worked the docks. He saw the city change, but he never thought the tower would be next to fall. Then he read the article, the one with the blueprint, the leaked tunnel plans, and Clara's warning. He knew it was real, because he had seen it before. In 1958, he said the city had tried something similar. He'd heard rumors of a quiet job, something about clearing space for a new freeway ramp. Back then, he was told to stay away from the tower at night. He didn't ask questions. But one night, he saw 2 men carrying drills into the east wall. That same month, the foundation shook, but nobody reported it. He remembered a city truck showing up, pouring concrete under the floor, and sealing the area by dawn. And now, it was happening again. Frank called Clara, told her everything. She listened, took notes, and asked, "Will you speak about it?" Frank said yes, but only if it's outside, in front of the building, where everyone could hear him. A few days later, he stood with Clara and her students, in his old Navy jacket, holding a microphone with shaky hands, and spoke. That tower, it was the first thing we saw after war. It was the last thing many of my friends saw before leaving. If you tear it down, you're not just breaking stone, you're breaking memory. The crowd grew quiet. Some clapped, some cried. The video went viral. World War II veteran defends San Francisco landmark. News outlets started calling. Reporters showed up at the plaza. People brought flowers and candles. Tourists took selfies and posted. #Save the tower. City Hall stayed silent, but behind the scenes, pressure was building. The mayor called an emergency meeting. She wanted the public to calm down. But Apex Infrastructure Group told her, "Too much noise. If this continues, we pull out." That scared her. She sent a statement to the media. "We respect the public's concern. The Ferry Building will not be harmed, only restored." But Clara had proof, and so did Luis. They sent a new file to the press, one that showed active demolition permits, hidden under the name Bayfront Structural Adjustments, Phase 3. It was a cover, and now the cover was broken. More people joined the cause. Families, war veterans, teachers, even tech workers from downtown. They printed posters. "Let her ring again. History can't be demolished. The clock is watching." And then came the final push. A letter, written by Frank, published on the front page of the local paper. "When we came back from war, we didn't ask for parades. We asked for our country. That tower is part of it. Let it stand." That night, something strange happened. At exactly 9:00 p.m., the clock moved. Just once. One tick, then stopped again. Some said it was mechanical. Others said it was a sign. But across town, the city was making its final plan. One last meeting. One final decision. No reporters. No protesters. Just men in suits, sitting in a room labeled 7B. It was quiet on the outside, but inside City Hall, a storm was brewing. Behind 3 locked doors, down a silent hallway, room 7B waited. Inside that room sat 4 men, and one decision. The door clicked shut at exactly 8 a.m. No phones allowed, no recordings, only papers, folders, and pens. On the table, a single document, Ferry Building Redevelopment Final Approval. 3 signatures needed, 1 to pass, 1 to fund, 1 to authorize immediate action. It would mean the end. The tower would be gone in 60 days. The first man signed without speaking. He had real estate plans waiting, office buildings, rooftop lounges. He didn't care about old bricks. The second man hesitated, then signed too. He'd been promised campaign support, more power. Only one man was left. His name was Elliot Graff. He picked up the pen, stared at the signature line, then stopped. His hand trembled. Memories rushed in. He saw himself, 8 years old, sitting on his father's shoulders, waving at ships as the clock tower chimed behind him. It wasn't just a building. It was the last place he saw his father alive. Elliot put the pen down. The others stared. "What's the problem?" one asked. "I need more time," Elliot said softly. "There is no more time." Elliot stood up, took the folder in his hands, and walked out of the room. Across town, Clara was still gathering support. Luis was updating the protest plan. Frank had fallen ill, but sent a voice recording they could play at the next event. They didn't know it yet, but inside Elliot's mind, a war had begun. Back in his office, Elliot opened a drawer, pulled out a file labeled Historic Archives, Ferry Preservation Denied. Inside was a report from 1997. It included testimonies from historians, photos of the tower during the 1906 fire, a list of all the people who had arrived there after World War II. He flipped through the pages. At the bottom was a note from a city archivist. "We should protect what protected us." Elliot leaned back, closed his eyes. He knew what he had to do. He made a call to a journalist he once trusted, a woman named Jody Lang. Sharp, smart, honest. He told her everything, sent her the unsigned file. And one more thing, a voice recording, taken secretly during the Room 7B meeting. He had placed a mic inside his pen. By evening, the headline hit the front page. Exclusive, city officials secretly approved Ferry Building demolition. The article went viral. Online, people flooded social media. Protesters grew from dozens to hundreds. City Hall panicked. They sent out a press release. These claims are false. No such approval was finalized. But Jody posted the recording, clear as day. The voices, the votes, the words. Let's just finish this and move on. It couldn't be denied. Outside the Ferry Building, Clara stood on the small stage, microphone in hand. She pressed play on Frank's voice recording. If they take it down, they take down our stories. But if we stand up, maybe the clock will chime again. Tears rolled down faces in the crowd. Children stood on shoulders, just like Elliot once had. And then, a bell rang. The crowd gasped. The clock had moved. For the first time in weeks, the tower rang. Just once, but it was enough. Inside City Hall, Elliot sat alone in Room 7B. In his hand, the unsigned file. His pen beside it. This time, he signed something else. A reversal order. Demolition canceled. But the battle wasn't over, because Apex Infrastructure Group wasn't going down without a fight. They had invested millions. They had legal contracts. And they were ready to strike back. The tower had rung once. Only once. But that one sound was louder than 1,000 voices. It echoed across the bay, across the streets, through hearts. People felt it, and they came. They came in cars, on foot, on bicycles. Old men in navy jackets, young students in hoodies, mothers with children, veterans with medals pinned to their coats. They didn't need an invite. They only needed a reason. And now they had one. By sunrise, the plaza was full. Hundreds, then thousands. Some held candles, some held signs, but most just stood still, looking up at the clock tower, waiting. Inside City Hall, phones rang nonstop. Emails flooded inboxes. News cameras were already live. And one word trended across every screen. Hashtag let her ring. Apex Infrastructure Group was furious. They sent legal threats, accused the city of breaking contracts, demanded money, but the mayor refused to back down. Because now, the world was watching. Elliot stood before the press. He didn't smile. He didn't read from paper. He just spoke. We forgot what this building meant. We thought we could build something better. But you can't build a memory. You can only keep it alive. Behind him, Luis and Clara stood side by side, their faces calm, but their eyes full of fire. Then the mayor stepped forward, took a breath, and made the announcement. As of today, the Ferry Building is declared a protected historic landmark. No demolition, no modification, no silence. Cheers erupted. People hugged. Frank's recording played again from speakers. Let the tower stand, like it did for us. But the people weren't done. They wanted the tower to speak again. And at exactly noon, it did. Dong. The clock rang once. Dong. Then twice. Dong. 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 12 times. Just like it used to. Clean. Loud. Proud. The people clapped. Some cried. Others just stood, looking up, as if hearing history for the first time. That evening, something beautiful happened. Photos of the day flooded the internet. Hashtags filled with memories. Old pictures. New smiles. Stories of grandparents who arrived there. Fathers who left for war. Children who played in its halls. And deep inside one of the tower's rooms, Claire found something. A small box. Old. Dusty. Locked. Luis opened it gently. Inside, a journal with the initials WD. Walter Day. On the first page, it said, "If the people forget, the tower falls. If they remember, it will ring forever." That night, the clock lit up. Not just a building, but a beacon. A reminder. That history doesn't live in papers. It lives in people. And when the people show up, nothing can tear it down.